Sometimes when you're driving down the road all by yourself, you begin to hear a voice that tells you need to look around, pay attention, maybe something isn't quite right. That voice is me. It's the voice of Gord.
Hey everybody, how's it going? You'll have to pardon my voice. I've been very sick for the last couple of weeks. Had a pretty bad flu here. Had a pretty high temperature. I was on my butt here at home. Not getting very much done except coughing. And now I've lost my voice. So you'll have to bear with me. Welcome back to Voice of Gord. The very reduced voice of Gord. Happy New Year again, 2025. Today is Thursday, January 16th. The episode I'm about to bring you with the wonderful Kevin Rutherford was recorded, I believe, back in late November. My apologies for the delay. It's been very busy with Christmas holidays and all that. But this is a great chat. It's been one of my favorites, actually. It didn't take me too much to edit it. Kevin's a very eloquent speaker. It's what he does for a living. And I think the flow and the content of this episode of the show are really good, and you're going to enjoy it. So I won't keep you long. I did want to share, however, a pretty major announcement. If you're a follower of my Substack, autonomoustruckers.substack.com, you will have read, hopefully, that I've been given a book deal. This new press publishing house called Freedom Convoy Books, who are so new they don't even have a website yet. They are looking around for new and unpublished authors exploring ideas and issues in America that are undiscussed or underdiscussed. And they really like my body of work and my writings and my podcasts on trucking. And they've asked me to build a book out of it. So I'm going to. Where you guys, my wonderful Voice of Gord listeners, come in is this. A, I want you to buy the book when it comes out next year in February 2026, I think is the published date. But Creed and Culture, being a new press and, they're not exactly heavily financed, they weren't able to get me a huge advance. And I'm going to have to take time away from work and probably time away from this podcast in order to concentrate on the book. So I'm asking for donations to help, just so I can pay the bills, feed my kids and whatnot. I'm a man of modest means. My pickup truck is, 27 years old. It's got 350,000 miles on it. My wife is a school teacher. We're not poor, but we're not swimming in money either. And in order for me to take the amount of time off and put the correct effort into writing a book about you guys, about my fellow truckers, and about an industry that's kind of had a bit of a war declared on it, I want to do it properly. And my wife is not going to let me do that without continuing to pay the bills. So it's a major ask for my listeners, but even if you've got a couple of bucks, my podcast has been free this whole time. It's, over 2 years old now, and we're getting up to 90 episodes I think I've got out the door. I've never charged anybody any money. I don't have any advertisers. This is my gift to you guys. Maybe you can help me out now. Help me get this book out the door. So in the show notes will be a link to my Give Send Go. GiveSendGo.com/end of the road. That's the working title of the book, End of the Road. It's going to be a look at what I call the silent war on truckers. The silent war on an occupation, on a job that once, was so honored in society that they used to make movies about us like Smokey and the Bandit and Convoy, and, Hollywood actors used to dress like us, not the other way around. It was a well-respected, well-paid, somewhat viewed as a glamorous job. And even if that Hollywood view wasn't entirely 100% real, it certainly was a lot better at one time. And I'm sure all of you know over the years, between deregulation, the surveillance state, the influx, the insourcing of third world labor to compete against us, the cops treating us like piggy banks, our customers disrespecting our time, all the problems you guys see out on the road. You know the score. I'm going to try and do my level best to tell that story of what's happened to trucking over all these years. So yeah, if you can help me out, I would really appreciate it greatly. Again, I'll leave the donation links in the show notes. You'll also find show notes, or in the show notes, links to the work of my guest, Kevin Rutherford. Many of you who've heard him on his own podcast and when he used to be a host on Sirius XM radio. Kevin's a real legend in the trucking industry. I've been looking forward to getting him on for a long time. He shares some really great stories with us. He's also a staunch defender of the Freedom Convoy, and near the end of the show, he tells us a story of how his defense of the Freedom Convoy and maybe a mistaken comment is what got him fired from Sirius XM. It's a really great conversation. Anyway, if you're not already, subscribe to my Substack, autonomoustruckers.substack.com. Tell your friends about this show. I really depend on word of mouth. I don't have an advertising department or any money to pay for any of that stuff. So thank you very much for spreading it around. I'm looking forward. I got a few more episodes in the holster here, but I am going to be winding the podcast down through March, April, May, and June to concentrate on this book. I'm not saying I'm shutting the podcast down, but there's going to be less of them in the spring. So anyway, let's get to Kevin Rutherford and let's truck.
Oh, good day, everybody. Welcome back to another fantastic episode of Voice of Gord. I'm Gord, and this is my voice. The other voice you're going to hear today is a voice you've probably heard as well, probably even more than mine. A sort of legendary trucking radio guy in his own right, a conference enjoyer, someone who's helped a lot of other truckers out with their businesses, a man who's been in the industry since the 1980s. His whole family were truckers. And this guy knows how to make money, and he wants to help you figure out how to do it too. From Let's Truck, Mr. Kevin Rutherford. Kevin, welcome to the show.
Well, great to be here. Quite an intro there. Thank you.
Well, I want to make sure people know who they're dealing with. So, and props to you. All the things I said were true. I've been trying to get you on for a little while. I think it's interesting, like you and I are both sort of lifelong people in the business, and now we probably commentate on it more than we drive.
Yeah.
I would rather drive myself, but there's forces at work which are preventing that. Anyhow, you're like myself, you're very forward, very opinionated, but it comes from a place of wanting to help, and it comes from a place of wanting to see improvement, both in people's lives and in the industry itself. And I think what you have to say is valuable and worthy of people to hear. And I'm very glad you decided to join the show. So if there's anybody listening who doesn't know who Kevin Rutherford is, give us your little bio and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, the easiest way to find me is go to letstruck.com. We've got stuff all over the internet. I do live shows every day. I am currently doing 15 to 20 hours a week of live.
Oh, wow.
I think the last time I looked on our app, we have 3,700 hours of content on the app, coming up on 4,000 hours on there. So I've been in the industry forever. My grandfather was an owner-operator. My father was an owner-operator, but he struggled with it his whole life. He didn't go to high school, didn't have any business experience. He just liked trucks and he liked working on them, but he just could never really make it as a business. So I kind of grew up watching that and decided I wanted to be a helicopter pilot instead, but that didn't work out so well. So I ended up with trucks, and I owned trucks for about 30 years, drove about 1 million miles before, and then kind of phased out. I would work part-time when my drivers needed a vacation or a day off, and then eventually just got too busy to drive at all. And then eventually got too busy with a radio show and a software company, and we do our own conferences that I decided to just sell the trucks and the company in 2012. But trucking is still what I do every day. I mean, I read about it, I talk about it, I work on it. Somebody said today, they were kind of criticizing me for one of my positions and said, you're supposed to be advocating for drivers. And I said, I don't know who claims I'm supposed to be doing anything. I said, I don't really advocate for anybody. I educate. I don't advocate. I educate. That's really what I do. I try to put out as much information as I can to help people understand how things work and how to do things better. I don't consider myself a representative of the industry or an advocate, or I'm an educator. I help people learn how to do things better. So that's really what I spend most of my time doing now. I'm either on the air 15 to 20 hours a week. I have a year-long training program. Just finished up a 2-hour session of that a little while ago. And I do a group coaching call every week, which is another 2 hours. So, I'm putting in a lot of hours, but it's all around the same topic. My sweet spot is really one truck, one driver. An owner that drives the truck he owns. And that's kind of my sweet spot because I think it is the most efficient way to move freight from point A to point B. Nobody else has as much skin in the game or as much control as the guy who was driving the one truck that he owns. Now, what's happened over the years is the people that have helped be really successful with one truck, many of them want to own more than one. So I've ended up with a lot of small fleets as clients, but that's a whole different ballgame. When I tell people that the decision to buy the second truck is bigger than the decision to buy the first.
Right. Yeah, and I've got a bunch of friends who are owner operators and a few that have dabbled in small fleet owning, and they've said much the same thing. Once you get into more trucks, the problems are on a sort of exponential curve, right?
And some of them are out of your control. That's the difference. When you own one truck and you drive it, you have a lot of control over all of the important stuff. And that's what I try to show people is you need to learn how to run this one truck as profitably as you possibly can. And then if you really think you want to own more trucks, we need to talk about how everything's going to change. I make a statement, and I completely mean this. I can guarantee one drive, if a person has one truck and they're going to drive it themselves, I can guarantee their success. I mean, I can guarantee they could make $75,000 a year or more. That would be a minimum. I have guys who make way more than that. I can guarantee that. We have the control to be able to do that. But I tell people, once you buy a second truck and put a driver in it, I can't guarantee anything anymore. That's how much different it is. It's a much, much bigger risk to have somebody else in the truck.
Right. I have a friend in Saskatchewan who will probably listen to this, like yourself. He was a lifelong soul truck owner operator. He's now moved into sort of freight agency and brokering.
Yeah.
Company he works for is very large, but they shall remain nameless.
Yeah.
But he always told me, he said, Gordo, if you ever buy your own truck, it has to be yours. You have to have your own authority, your own truck, your own customers. You have to be in charge. You have to be controlling costs. You have to be making the decisions because once other people are doing that for you, you're done.
Yeah. Now, the only thing I would say about that, because there is this thought in the industry that you've got to be the carrier. You have to have your authority. Well, you don't. There's a lot of opportunities out there to do other things, and sometimes that makes sense. I've done both. I had my own authority. I had direct customers, but I will tell you the operation that I had, where if I were to calculate my revenue per time I had to be involved. So how hard did I have to work? How many hours did I have to work directly to generate this revenue. And by far, my most profitable operation was when I had trucks leased to FedEx.
Really?
For the amount of time I put in, it wasn't even close. I mean, I had three trucks at the end. I was down to three trucks, all at FedEx, all on dedicated runs. And I had been there 20 some years by then. I had really good dedicated runs, but I could throw off on those three trucks, depending on the year where I was in my equipment purchases, somewhere between 80 and $110,000 a year net. And I worked less than an hour a week.
Damn.
There was nothing to do. My drivers had all been with me for 10 years or more, and they would retire, and I would have a waiting list of drivers to work for me. FedEx dispatched and did everything. The drivers run dedicated runs. They knew what to do. And I had a good shop that I could trust. And I told my drivers, if a truck needs work, take it to the shop. You don't need me. Take it over there. They'll take care of it. And so there was really nothing for me to do.
You
Payroll
had,
took all of
you,
10 minutes. And that was about it, unless there was some sort of a problem, and there just weren't that many problems.
you had set up a well-oiled machine. Now, you said you had drivers, and you say things change when you do have drivers. One of the things about, training a driver, whether or not they're brand new and wet behind the ears or they've been on the road a long time, is getting them to sort of accept your specific philosophy towards operating a piece of equipment, right? So,
Right.
like, you have a very specific, well researched, and well thought out approach of how you operate your trucks, which is, shall we say, unpopular with some people.
Yeah.
Um, it's fine with me because I share your affinity for driving slow. Something I learned over time
Yeah.
operating in places like this up north
Right.
and driving road trains in Australia, where if you flog the truck, you soon won't have one, and then you're popping tires in the heat, and you change tires yourself down there.
Yeah.
So, what? So you have this business now. You're no longer on the road. You're training people. You mentor them. You help people with your business. How hard was it to do to get people to accept your education when they were directly your employee rather than being a customer who is looking to you for advice in starting their business? Was there a difference there?
That's a good question because there's a huge difference there. And had I ever tried to treat my drivers the way I treat people who come to me for training or want to learn more, I would have failed. Though that is such a different situation. So when you ask, how did I train the drivers? I tried not to. I tried to find the drivers that I didn't need to train. Because
Good headhunting.
Yeah, because the odds of me changing somebody's thought process like that is slim to none. Now, I could show them how I like things done, but here's just a good example. When I would run an ad for drivers, and I didn't have to do it all that often, except in the beginning, once I started getting drivers, I paid really well. I had good conditions. So I didn't have virtually zero turnover. But when I did run an ad, if a driver called and they immediately started asking about equipment, like what kind of truck am I would just hang up on them. I wouldn't even give them the courtesy of answering the question. That person is never going to work in my system. If the equipment they have to drive, now I get it. It's got to be safe. It's got to be clean. It shouldn't look like trash. But I kept my trucks to about 1.3 million mileage wise. And that's because I worked out that's where they're the most profitable. After that, you could start putting more into maintenance than it was worth it. It was time to upgrade to some new technology, better fuel mileage. But and I would have drivers who only want to drive a hood. Well, go someplace else. I mean, that's just not going to work in my operation. I needed to hire people who drove truck because they like to drive truck, but ideally they wanted to make as much money as they could.
Right.
I had a driver leave me and take was about an $8,000 a year pay cut as a driver so he could drive a long nose, a hood. He was willing to give up the $8,000 because he wanted to drive that truck instead of my aerodynamic truck.
That's
I'm
that that's an
make some money.
that's an expensive aesthetic consideration.
And I try to tell people, look, you spend 60 hours a week inside the truck. You can't see it. Who cares? Who cares what it looks like? Come on. I used to tell people when owner operators would do this, oh, but I really like that hood. And I'd say, look, why don't you do this then? Find the favorite truck you've ever seen, take a really nice professional picture of it and put it on the dash of your aerodynamic efficient truck, and you can look at it all day.
I think I used to have my last OTR job. I had a photo of my wife on the dash. Not
Well, that makes more sense. And it took me a long time to figure out where this mentality comes from. If you think about any other industry, carpenters don't care what their nail gun looks like. They just want it to be efficient and do the job. And that's the case with most tools in trade. We want good tools, we want quality, and we want it to do the job. But there's nothing about a classic truck that does the job better than an aerodynamic truck. I've asked people this all the time. Tell me one thing that this truck can do better. One reason why I would want to own this truck instead, given the fact that it's going to cost me about $10,000 more a year to own this truck. The only thing we ever came up with, the only advantage anybody has ever come up with, is the fact that they're easier to work on. That's it. That's it. They're not easier to back up. They're not more maneuverable. The visibility isn't better, it's worse. That there was nothing about an inefficient, non-aerodynamic truck that I could find that made any sense to own one.
Right. If the primary purpose and driving force is making money and getting on down the road, 100%.
To me, that's the only reason to own a business. I believe that as a business owner, my responsibility is to generate as much profit as I can.
Right, because there's only so much time on planet Earth, and time is valuable. Speaking of time and value and business ownership, another debate online we all like to have, never mind plastic versus hood trucks, is a big one going around today is something about broker transparency.
I was hoping we'd get to that.
Oh, why not? It's of the moment. So people ask me about that, and I have a couple of different minds about it, but okay. I have this very good way of taking everything back to the issues I care about and making them fit in with whatever we're talking about, because there are relationships between these issues. So there's a lot of people who are complaining about broker transparency, and they want brokers to have to publicize what their margins are and what the original bill for the freight was. Okay, that's an argument. There are those who see that this is only ever a problem in down markets. When markets are really hot, you don't hear people complaining about that too much, which is also true.
Right.
My uncle was a very successful broker. He started a brokerage in Canada in the mid-1980s, retired in 2009, made a nice pot of money. His business partner kept going, and then eventually retired with an even bigger pot of money. And I think because my uncle was a driver and then a manager at a couple of trucking companies, he had like a sort of driver's perspective and a trucking company owner's perspective. And when he ran his brokerage, he always said, you can't screw the truckers. They're the guys that make this work. And so he came into that business with the appropriate attitude. Now, that's not to say all brokers do that, right? That's not to say that all owner operators come in with the right attitude towards business, towards their clients, towards what they're even doing themselves. As far as this transparency stuff goes, as I mentioned, when markets are good, people are less worried about it. When markets are bad, they're really worried about it. But you have managed to always make money and done very well for yourself. So, what's your argument against broker transparency? And given that this only ever seems to come up when markets are down, how is it you manage to keep going when markets are down, and what is your advice to people?
Got it. So, boy, there's so many ways I could approach this. Let's talk about my advice on how to make this work first, and then we can come back to the details of broker transparency and how I feel about it. So, if I just talk about the method that I teach to work with brokers, if you were to follow this method, many of the problems we talk about would just disappear. We wouldn't be talking about them. Most of these things, we've created the problem ourselves.
When you
And
say we, what do you mean?
this specifically, owner operators, small carriers, we created the problem we're now screaming about. And so let me try to explain my method. Here's, you want a bonus for this show?
Sure.
How about if I give you the secret to success in business?
All right. What is it?
I think I looked this up one time. I think I did a search on Amazon for books, and I did a search for books with the secret to success in the title or in the book, and I think I came up with like 300,000 books. Like, this isn't much of a secret. There's an awful lot of books, but here's the secret to success in any business. In order to succeed in business, you have to provide more value to your customer than anybody else can. And if you do that, you will always succeed. I don't care what the business is. I don't care how you do it, but you have to provide more value to your customer than anybody else can. Well, now, once you understand that, you have to figure out who your customer is. And I am shocked by people in this industry that have never thought about this. They don't really know who their customer is. And when I point out who their customer is, they argue with me as though, no, that's not my customer. Look, here's the way you figure this out. If you want to know who your customer is, whose check did you cash? That's all. That's how this always works. Who paid you to do what you did? So if we look at trucking, let's go back to my example. I said my most profitable operation was actually leasing trucks to FedEx. Who was my customer?
FedEx.
FedEx. How many owner operators that are leased to carriers do you know that treat that carrier like it's their customer? Almost nobody. They talk about them like they're dirt. Oh God, they're screwing me all the time. They hold me up over here. They tell me they don't talk about them like they're customers at all. But they are. If you're going to accept their check and work for them and get paid by them, they're your customer. You should treat them that way. And it's really important in this case because how many customers did I have when I was at FedEx? One. You don't want to piss off your only customer. But it's also easy to really provide good value to one customer. Now, if I decide to go get my own authority and I choose to move a load through a broker, who's my customer?
The broker.
Does anybody talk about brokers in this industry like they're our customers?
I mean,
No, we talk about them like they're the enemy.
Oh, the better ones do. I mean, shout out to Jamie Hagan.
There you go.
He considers
right on the head.
He considers his brokers customers, or the ones that he works with.
Yep, absolutely. And that is the mindset that I try to teach. The mindset should always be, I have a customer, and the way to be successful is to provide more value to that customer than anybody else can. Now, that's a simple concept. It's really difficult to do in the real world. If it was easy, everybody would do it, and everybody.
Right. Well, speaking of the real world, we have fluctuations in the market. The market's a fluid and dynamic beast. And then sometimes you'll have too many trucks in the market. There'll be excess capacity. And then you start seeing rates go down. And then your customer, who is the broker, calls you up and says, "Oh man, there's folks nibbling around. I gotta get you to concede on a rate here. Now what?"
Yeah. And what would we do in that situation? That we would do the same thing. We want the most value for the money we're going to spend too. If our shop is charging us twice as much as the shop down the street and the work is shoddy, we're not going to stick with them. We're going to go find somebody that provides more value to us. And we have to realize when we're the value provider, there's two parts. There's the service I provide and the price I charge to do it. That's value. It's both parts of that. So I have to be really good at it. And no matter how good I am, I can't gouge people. Look, hey, let's just be honest about this industry. What is the standard that most shippers are shooting for? Here's what it is. All we care about is that the freight gets there to wherever it needs to go, sort of on time and mostly undamaged, right? Isn't that kind of the criteria?
Well, this is the problem with trucking as a service, is that the actual expectation, as you put it, is fairly low. Not
Yeah.
all. I mean, some certain niche freight markets and some certain
Right.
products will have different requirements, but at the end of the day, a van with 24 skids on it needs to get somewhere and take the
That's it.
24 skids off. It's
That's
not
it.
rocket science.
Right. So here's what I tell small carriers and owner operators. Go after that other freight that you just talked about. Go find that freight that requires somebody who's better at this, that requires a better driver, a better logistics manager, somebody who can manage their time, somebody who can problem solve. Go find that difficult freight, because that's where you can shine. If you're out there trying to pull loads of beer and water with all the mega carriers, what are you going to do to set yourself apart? Nobody cares about that freight. You can't set yourself apart in that kind of freight. So the first thing is, don't try to compete with the mega carriers on the freight they love. Go find the difficult freight that they can't do in 100 years and get good at it and find a niche. But if we go back to the business model with brokers, the first time I got a clue as to why carriers hated brokers so much was when I started doing taxes for owner operators and small fleets. And I got a tax return in one year, and I'm a little off on the number, but I had well over 100 1099s from brokers. One truck, one driver. He had over 100 1099s. So what it told me is he was never even doing two loads for anybody. And I actually gave it a name. We called it one and done. So here's what happens on the load board. And I have a really good relationship with both load boards, so I know this from their data. People go in, they do a search for whatever lane they want to find freight in. And once the search comes up, do you know what button they click on next? We know what button they click on. That's how technology works. The next click after they do the search is sort by rate. They want to bring the top rates up to the top. Okay, great. I get it. We all want a good rate. So now you call that broker, you get the load. 2 or 3 days later, you're going to pull another load. You go do the same thing. You search, you click by rate. What are the odds that that same broker's coming up to the top again? Almost none. There's 20,000 brokers in the country. So now there's somebody else that's up there at the top. So you pull a load for them. Then you pull a load for the next guy. You're wasting a ton of time because you got to onboard. You got to learn everybody's new system. You got to figure out what kind of tracking they like. And then you're gone. And they know this. The brokers know that most of these single truck guys do this. So are they going to try to invest in a relationship with you? Are they just going to have you move the freight, and if you call again someday, maybe they'll work with you? It's a horrible way to do business. So I tell people the load board, the first thing you should be using the load board for is just to find good brokers that have that specialty freight in those lanes that you want to run, and then you go build a relationship with them. And I tell people, you really want to set yourself apart, don't call them. Go find their office and go visit them. Sit down and tell them about your business model and how you like to operate and build a relationship. You get 3 to 5 good brokers they'll give you about 95% of your freight. You can fill in those weird, trips now and then from the load board. Think about all the problems this solves. How much talk right now is there about freight fraud?
Oh, tons.
This freight fraud goes away. The only way they pull off this freight fraud is because nobody knows who's who.
Nobody knows who's hauling their freight. And this is
Right.
something I want to share. I mean, maybe you saw this. I don't know. I was very generously gifted a ticket to Craig Fuller's Future of Freight Festival thing in Chattanooga
Yeah,
last
great.
year. Not this
Yeah.
one, 2023.
I actually met you there.
Right. And then I was just sort of paying attention, taking it all in. And it just struck me like how much of this freight tech stuff is just trying to clean up this trust thing, trying to like clamp down on the fraud, trying to
Yeah.
make sure that motor carrier numbers are who they say they are.
Right.
And I haven't operated in freight world in a long time, and that was surprising to me that like the business had gotten to this point where half of the stuff on display at this massive freight tech festival is just
Yeah.
all like trying to do a sort of rear guard action for the lack of trust and
Yep.
knowing even who's doing what in the business. I was just kind of floored by that.
So if you take a model like you mentioned, Jamie's a good friend of mine. He knows his brokers. He has personal relationships with them. Freight fraud is not an issue for them. Take the one truck guys working with 3 to 5 good brokers. Freight fraud's not an issue. Now, the one time that I need to go pull a load off the load board, if it's once in a while, I can take enough time to make sure that this is a good transaction. I don't have to do it on every load. I only have to do it on about 1% of my loads because the rest of them are moving through brokers I have a relationship with. Here's the other thing people don't realize. When they go to that board and sort those loads by rate, the first thing they should know, the best loads aren't there. Brokers don't put their best loads on load boards. They put the stuff they can't move with their dedicated carriers on load boards. They know it's going to a stranger. They're not going to pay top rate on it. The best freight never makes it to the board. The best freight is the one that when I call my list of brokers in the morning or I send an email out to them saying, hey, I'm going to be empty tomorrow here, then I get the best freight sent back to me. It's never even going to touch the board.
Right. Yeah, you're not the first person to say that.
So this idea, let's go back to the broker transparency. So there's a couple ways we could talk about this. In the big picture, to me, this is just anti-business. I don't want regulations like this. I don't like regulations like this. We don't get to know the margins of other businesses. That's their business, not ours. I don't think any owner operator wants the brokers knowing what their profit margin is. Why should we know what their margins are? We shouldn't. That's not how business works. I know what I need to move freight to make money. If that broker can't offer me that rate, I don't hate them because of that. I don't call them dirt bags because they don't have the rate I need. I go find the broker that does have the freight that I want and is willing to pay for my services. I mean, that's just how business should work. So first off, this idea that we should have this transparency, I don't care about any of the details. I just say no. There should, and rate transparency is always a race to the bottom.
How is it a race to the bottom? Explain that way
Sure.
of framing.
So tell me have you ever heard drivers talk about like, what's the U-Ship, the website? So, what was the name of that show? Shipping Wars.
I've heard of that. Yep.
Yeah, so Shipping Wars was this TV show, reality show where they used U-Ship. U-Ship is an open website that you can go to. And even if I wanted to let's say I wanted to ship a car somewhere, I can just go to U-Ship and I put the car up there and people with authority in trucks and trailers will bid on that car. Or I might have a pallet that I want to ship somewhere and I'm not a shipper, but I can just go put it on U-Ship. But U-Ship is like eBay. It's a bidding site. I get to see what you just bid on this load. So now that I see what you bid, I'm going to bid 2 cents a mile less because I know exactly what you bid. I don't have to try to guess. I don't have to wonder, man, I wonder if Gord got $4 a mile for this. Hell, I'd pull it for $3.50. No, I get to see you just bid $3 on it, and I'm going to bid $2.99. And guess what the next guy's going to bid? When you can see the rate, when there is rate transparency, you will drive the rate down to the bottom every single time. That's how bidding sites work. That's why as service providers, we should hate bidding sites. As consumers, I love them. I can see the price. I'm going to get the cheapest price possible. But as the service provider, I don't want that. And that's all this rate transparency would do. It's just like an open bidding site. I can see what everybody else is bidding now or moving this freight for, and I'm just going to go in and cut the rate.
Right. It's like handing your competitors an ice pick to like smash your own tires.
So just on the surface, it doesn't make any sense to me at all. So I'm against it. Then if we want to get into the details, the argument is, well, yeah, but it's in the regulations already. It is, but you should understand why. In 1980, the Motor Carrier Act of 1980 that deregulated the trucking industry, which is exactly what should have happened, and we should never go back to that. When that occurred, freight brokers really didn't exist. There were some brokers in the market, but most people don't realize C.H. Robinson did not start as a freight broker. C.H. Robinson was a produce broker. Produce brokers ended up becoming freight brokers after deregulation, and then a whole bunch more brokers got in. But in the very beginning, I worked as a broker back then. The carrier paid me directly for me to go find freight for them. That was a whole different relationship, and that's where this regulation came from. But then immediately within 10 years, the whole industry changed and brokers became what they are today. The broker goes out and secures the freight from the shipper. That's his contract. He negotiated that contract with the shipper. Now he is going to look for a carrier to move it, and he's going to pay them. There's no reason to have that old regulation in there still. It's just a leftover was all it was. It doesn't even make any sense.
Right.
So when owner operators would read this regulation and call the broker and say, look, the regulation says you have to provide this data to me. Well, first off, it's after the transaction, not before. They don't have to, the regulation does not say they have to show it to you before the negotiation. It's after the freight is already moved. Then you have the right to go back and see the original invoice. But brokers started writing contracts saying, if you want to work with us, you have to waive your right to see that data. And that's a contract. And then people started screaming, you can't sign away your rights. Oh, yes, you absolutely can. And that's what the FMCSA just decided, that you are absolutely allowed to write a contract that says, I want you to waive your right to see this information because we're not going to show it to you. And if you want to move that freight and you're willing to sign that contract, the FMCSA just said it's completely legal to waive that right. So to me, this whole issue is done. I mean, that was the issue there. If the brokers are allowed to waive the right in the contract, then we're done. There's no way to enforce this rule.
Getting back to what I was saying about volatility in the markets, cycles, excess capacity, not enough capacity.
Yeah.
One of the things I like to complain about often, which I'm sure you've seen in my writings, is the government interfering in the total number of trucks and drivers on the market. But a free market's a free market, right? And people should come into it or out of it of their own volition without any assistance and as minimum amount of hindrance from the state, hopefully.
I agree.
And what we've seen, at least in my study of this, is that there's an artificial amount of drivers on the market coming from a couple of different fronts. In some ways, it's from the government not enforcing their own rules. And in other ways, there's this sort of interesting complex between large carriers, sometimes even small and medium carriers, and this idea that there's never enough truck drivers around, which they then take to the state and say, give us money to train people. And then we have 450,000 new CDLs get issued every year in America, according to the Association of DMV Operators, which is like all 50 state DMVs get together, their own little industry trade group, right? Such that you can have one when it's government agencies, but you get what I'm saying. So by their own numbers, 450,000 new CDL holders a year. Secretary of Transportation, soon to be unemployed, Pete Buttigieg, has acknowledged, to the government's knowledge, they know that 300,000 people quit or give up their CDLs every year. Why are these people coming and going? What's the problem? as you and I know, it's a retention thing, right? So in a market, labor is a commodity like any other, right?
Right.
And you don't want the government subsidizing the production of that commodity because then it distorts other parts of the market and you see problems. So
Yes.
my big thing is that the number of drivers in the market is juiced by the state. And then not only does that create problems for the ebbs and flows of the market, the dynamism of capacity, it also results in like people getting into the business who maybe aren't the highest quality operators around.
Absolutely.
The sort of standards for these training schools are not exactly kept very high when like you're getting free government money and the government gives them the money because oh it's a jobs program, we're helping people get a job. Okay, that's fine. I mean, on its face it sounds
Right.
okay,
Right.
but like when it's been going on for decades and when the people who get that job typically leave it within a year,
There's a problem.
that's a problem, and we should be
Yeah.
asking ourselves, why is this happening? And one of the things I've come to is that I've done the research on this, and as have others, is that the government's just giving these people money.
Yeah.
CDL mills, various training schools, technical colleges, state schools. There's all kinds of government money to keep training drivers.
Right.
And I would say to the industry, and especially the people that rely on this, um, maybe you need to figure out how to train your own guys or make a better arrangement with drivers so that they're not getting in debt or do something to fix this yourself. This is not the taxpayer's problem, right?
Correct.
And again, that affects capacity. And when there's more of these people around, well, when you have more of something, the price for that thing goes down.
Right.
This is basic economics, right?
Right.
And then there's the externalities where, again, this is where it's not just simply a matter of numbers, but there's a matter of quality, there's a matter of type of people. Over the last few years, we're starting to see this creep when you look into incident reports and news articles about truck collisions, and the
Yeah.
drivers are maybe not from America, and maybe it's later find out that they didn't speak English, and well, okay, how did you get a CDL, right?
Correct.
Um, a friend of mine who's a writer, Matthew Crawford, wrote this article last year about one party rule in the state of California as seen through their DMV, because he tried to get some kind of an abatement or an adjustment for the muffler system on his motorcycle because California is California. So
Yeah.
he found out that there was a particular state DMV office where there was a Chinese lady that worked there, and you would pull up and text this number, and you would sit there in the parking lot, and she would come out, and you would give her the paperwork you needed that you knew you couldn't pass because your vehicle had modifications on it that California says no. She would
Right.
walk in and come out 20 minutes later with your paperwork, no questions asked. And it
Imagine
turned
that.
and it turns out that this very same DMV was also caught issuing 300 CDLs to people who never did the road tests for them.
That's a problem. And the topic you're bringing up about all the immigration, legal immigration, when we've created these programs and visa programs because the industry is convinced the government that we're short on drivers. That is the single biggest problem, in my opinion. If we stop that, everything else gets better. I am all for competition. In business, there's always going to be volatility. I am also for very low barriers of entry into business. But there's another issue here. This business requires you to be a licensed driver. That's where I want tougher standards. I want tough standards on drivers getting the CDL, getting into the industry. If you have too many accidents or problems in your first year, we need to wash you out or retrain you, we don't do any of that. If we did that, then I am fine with almost no barriers to get into the business of trucking. If you're a good driver and if you've qualified, you're a good driver, we're fine having you out on the roads, and you want to be a truck owner, I don't want there to be any barriers there. Very, very minimal. I am all for the more people you allow in, the tougher the competition gets and the better we all get. That's my point. That's what made America great. We compete at everything. We are highly competitive, except we're losing that. Now we raise our kids not to keep score in sports, and everybody gets a trophy, and everybody has to win, and we have to level the playing fields. I think that's where we're doing all the damage. I think I'm a good example. I've heard lots of people say, oh, there should be a much higher barrier to getting a truck and getting into this business. I disagree. Had there been a much higher barrier, I may not be in this industry. I barely made it. I was dumb. I didn't know anything about business. I almost failed, but I didn't. There were low enough barriers that I was able to get into this industry. I was able to learn and survive. And I believe that I have now become an asset for this industry. And I may not be here had there been any higher barriers. But I agree with you on the driver part of it. That's where we're creating a lot of our problems.
Well, so here's the thing, right? So we can get into sort of like libertarian theory because I think, you identify as such. I've spent a lot of time studying that. I'm not sure where I'm at these days, but I was there for a while.
Yeah.
So there's stuff the government does, and there's stuff private industry does. You get some extreme libertarians that say the roads should be sold, everything should be private, and then the people that own the roads can determine who gets the license and what their standards are for the roads. I'm not saying I agree with that, but that's an argument some people make.
Yeah.
But I think you and I agree, while the state is in charge of the roads, while the government is taking money from us, the taxpayer, from truckers through their fuel taxes, and they are making the rules, they should be doing a better job of who is getting on those roads in the first place, because it strikes me that they're not. And then those costs get put in other places, right? So like you coach people on business, our major expense is fuel, and then the truck, and then insurance. And this is where we see the manifestation of these other problems popping up, right? I interviewed an insurance sales guy and an adjuster, someone who's been in the trucking insurance business for over 30 years down in Texas. I had to take that down. Only podcast I've had to take down because he mentioned the name of an insurance company in passing. He wasn't accusing them of anything. He just happened to mention their name. They had some program, like a robot, scanning the internet for their name. They sent him a cease and desist later because they didn't want to be associated with the conversation he had with me.
Too bad.
Yeah, I know. It's terrible.
Too bad.
I asked this gentleman questions pertaining to our discussion here. I said, if you're a really good operator and you've got like a provable track record of like X number of years safe driving, no violations, clean abstract, like you should be getting a pretty significant discount, especially if like you've been doing it, say, for 20 or 30 years.
Right.
And this guy said to me, he's like, the insurers cannot do that. They can give you sort of marginal discounts, but the discount that you ought to get having that record, they cannot give you because there's too many other people eating out of the insurer's pie for paying out for incidents.
Oh, I see.
Right?
Yeah.
So, but basically he's like, yes, you're a great customer and you should get a discount. I can't give it to you because everybody else getting in accidents is taking all this money out of the pot and we have to recoup it. So they're socializing it. So the insurance industry, through the government's lack of attention to who's getting on the road in the first place, is having to socialize the cost to their customers of the bad actors. So effectively, we're getting a socialized insurance market.
Well, let's take a step back. Insurance is always socialized. Always. It has to be. Here's why. If I could self-insure, then I don't need an insurance company. I can't self-insure. I can't afford $100,000 accident. It'll put me out of business. So I have to go into a pool of risk. That's what insurance is. And yes, we have to charge for everybody in the pool. So it's not the insurance. That's how insurance has to work. It's a pool, and our risk is based on everybody in the pool. We'll go back to the original topic, which is, again, what created the problem. It's not the insurance. It's the fact that we've let so many bad actors in. Our insurance pool is a horrible risk, and we all have to pay for that. Now, I will say, though, that in the last year, I have seen a one truck carrier paying $8,000 a year for their insurance, and I've seen a bunch of one truck carriers pay almost $30,000 for their insurance. That's how bad it is.
Interesting. What do
Part
you
of the
what
problem
do you
is,
think? What do you think's causing that variation in rates?
well, part of the problem are different states. If you try getting insured with a truck in New York or New Jersey, good luck. Go to Texas, no big deal. Go to some other state, go to South Dakota, dirt cheap. So we don't have a national insurance policy. It's local, very local. And the state regulations can drive prices up. That's why you see places like New York and New Jersey with lots of regulations have crazy high prices. You see places like South Dakota with hardly any regulations, and you don't have those crazy prices. Then it is experience. I mean, the guy that I know that's paying $8,000 for insurance, he's had his own authority for 20 years and he's safe.
Right. But so he is able to get that discount by virtue of geography rather than
Some of it is geography, right? Some of
right.
it is his record, but it's not as, like you said, it's not as much as it should be. But it's like health insurance. I've been saying for years, we need to stop arguing about health insurance because that's not the issue. I don't care if you think the government should be paying for it all or we should all have to pay for our own insurance ourselves. Doesn't matter. The problem is our healthcare costs have become so expensive that nobody can afford them. We have to make people healthier or we're never going to be able to afford healthcare. In this case, we have to make drivers safer or we can't afford insurance.
Right. So two parallel insurance industries or two areas that insurance covers, but the problems function quite similarly.
Same thing, right?
All right, and that's oddly enough, that's a good springboard for another thing you do that you're also very vocal about is health. Much like our mutual friend Mike Lombard, let's make truckers healthier. And I remember when we spoke on the phone when I was interviewing you for that piece I wrote in American Compass, and you were telling me about how you were listening to a lot, like before podcasts, there was like audio books and
Right.
different radio programs you listened to while you were out on the road. And you were sort of like, uh, improving yourself and trying to teach yourself as much as you could find out. And
Yeah.
this same journey, this same, I should say, not journey, this same inclination towards helping yourself has also taken you to helping your own health and also trying to educate people on their health. So Mike always says stop drinking soda, walk 45 minutes a day. That's the start.
Right.
In Kevin Rutherford's world, what is your start to make truckers healthier?
Let's separate something because I think this confuses us, and Lombard's a good example of this. We need to separate health from fitness. Those are two different things. They're two very different things. I will tell you right now at this moment, for my age, I'm extremely healthy. I'm not all that fit right now because I've spent a lot of time in the last 6 months doing what I'm doing right now, sitting at a desk, staring at a device of some kind, talking, not moving, not being active. In the summertime when I'm out I'm a big gardener, so I'm outside, sometimes 8 and 10 hours a day on the weekends. I'm much more fit in the summertime because I'm more active. In the wintertime, I tend to just work a lot. So I focus primarily on health. I can help people with fitness. I used to own a gym. I coached wrestling for years, but my focus is more on health. There are a lot of people in the industry that have a big focus on fitness, which is different. I know fit people who aren't healthy, and I know healthy people who aren't necessarily fit. Ideally, we'd like to be both. But here's the mistake I think we make. You know what the average truck driver looks like today, right?
Yeah, they're hard to miss.
Yeah. So if you had to guess, what do you think the average weight is these days for a career male truck driver?
275, 300.
I was going to say it's got to be between 250 and 300. So I think we're both right there. That's that's insane. Nobody should be that weight. That is horribly unhealthy. We know that the lifestyle itself is unhealthy, but the last thing you can do is tell one of these guys, you got to go get on a treadmill and get your heart rate up to 130 for, 20 minutes. It's not going to happen. It's pure misery. And here's the thing. All the evidence shows exercise is not good for weight loss. It just doesn't work.
No, it's calories. Yeah, it's how
It,
much you're eating and what you're eating.
it's what you're eating. Far, far more important. And if you just work out a lot, all you're going to do is increase your appetite. So you're going to end up eating more or suffering because you're trying not to eat. After 10 years of doing this and working with tens of thousands of truck drivers, here's my best advice for people on health. If I can only tell you one thing, here's what I tell everybody. Eat as many animal products as you can possibly eat and really limit the number of plants in your diet. In fact, if you don't need to eat any plants, don't. There's nothing about plants that make us healthier. I'm completely convinced of that now. We are carnivores. Plants have lots of issues. The vegetables are not as healthy as what they told us they were. They have anti-nutrients, they have problems. So even though I'm a big gardener, my diet is 90% carnivore. I give away most of what I grow.
Right. Is that not exclusive to your famous, infamous tomato crops?
Correct. I do grow a lot of tomatoes, both the kind that produce red fruits and the kind that just produce buds. And yeah, um, we could talk about that topic too. That's another one of my favorites.
Oh
And
man, I locally proximate to me. I know some people in the industry. Yeah, I understand a little bit about that. I was growing some green tomatoes outdoors for a little while myself, just,
yeah,
to supplement the income. But never
yeah,
mind. Yeah, we should share stories. I've had issues with weight fluctuation. Like probably less to do with activity because like I'm out of the truck now. I got laid off from my last trucking job a year and a half ago, and I've been concentrating on like my brother's business. My in-laws have a couple of businesses I help them with.
yeah,
They're one's fairly physical, the other one a little more casual. But I'm moving a lot. I'm always moving around. But
right.
boy, oh boy, do I love to drink beer.
That
Um,
that's that'll cause some problems.
right, and beer is made from plants, hops,
Yep.
barley. Yeast comes from carbohydrates that are
Yep.
changing over. So like
And we have to talk about something else we've been lied about. You and I are about the same age. We've been through all this health advice over the years. How many years did they tell us one or two drinks of alcohol a night was actually healthy?
I've heard the whole like one glass of red wine's fine. One or two
Okay.
beers is fine. Is that
Bullshit.
incorrect?
It's totally incorrect. Alcohol is a toxin to the human body. There's no way around it. Now, look, I've been a drinker my whole life. I started drinking early because everybody in my family drank. In my 20s, I brewed my own beer. I was so into beer, I was brewing my own back then. For whatever reason, beer started making me not feel good. And I switched to wine. And for 20 years, I probably drank 2 glasses of wine every night. And I was under the belief that this is good for me. And I wouldn't drink three. I wouldn't go out and get trashed. But I would have 2 glasses of wine a night. Now that I've learned how to test all these things and I've tested so many of my own biomarkers, and there is nothing about alcohol that adds to our health. Nothing. It's a toxin. I still drink, and I tell people up front, I don't drink nearly as much as I used to. In fact, now it's a pretty rare thing. If somebody stops over and they've got a bottle of wine, I'll have a glass of wine with them. If I go out to dinner with somebody, I'll probably have a glass of wine. But alcohol is just not good for us. The alcohol itself will cause you to gain weight. Then all the carbohydrates on top of it are just going to make everything worse.
So I want to springboard from here to another question of another very contentious item in the news with regards to trucking. Is this clearinghouse, the sort of drug screening?
Yeah,
When they brought out drug testing back in, I want to say it was what, 95, 96,
sounds about right.
right? So back then you could, if you failed the drug test, you just went and applied somewhere else and did another
Right.
one. And if you passed, you were good to go. And the government tried to clamp down on that by imposing this thing called the clearinghouse, where everybody had to be registered,
Yeah.
especially if you failed. If you failed, you went on the clearinghouse, and then you had to get off of it. You had to like piss clean again, go through whatever remediation program. Apparently, there's some new change with this clearinghouse, and this month they're estimating like 178,000 CDLs are outstanding to be dealt with via the clearinghouse's rules, and they're
Right.
going to get downgraded. What's sort of your opinion on that specific issue? And then, like, obviously you're not a huge fan of alcohol. Alcohol's not one of the US DOT drug screens, but I think some
Yeah.
employers are within their right to do like a breathalyzer test when you come to work. Um,
Yeah. So my look, if you have to breathalyze me at work, if there's any chance that I'm showing up for a driving job with any alcohol left in I just should not be in the industry, period. Now, even
right.
when I'm a drinker, I still believe that. And people are probably going to be surprised about my opinion on this. We have laws about drug testing within our industry. We all accept that. I'm not against those. If we're going to have these rules, I want the rules to be as fair as possible. So I'm all for a national program if it's run right. The problem with our government is they screw up everything they touch. But I don't think it's right that there were ways to cheat the system before and get around it. So if we're going to have this testing, then create a system where it's fair. We're all tested the same way. We can't get around these rules. But let's move on to how goofy all the rules are. So if I want to drink alcohol, I could go out tonight and get trashed. I mean, blacked out drunk. And I'm not going to sleep good tonight. When I wake up in the morning, even 8 hours from now, I may not have the alcohol in my system anymore, but am I impaired?
Oh yeah.
Absolutely. I should not be driving in that state, but we have no way to test for that. We have no way to stop it. So we're fine with that. Go get trashed if you want. Once the alcohol's out of your system, you will let you drive, except I don't think you're safe at that point.
No.
So I have a problem
No,
with
no,
that.
no, no, nobody should be driving with an epic hangover.
Exactly. You're impaired. That you may not have alcohol in your system, but you are impaired. You are not a sharp driver at this point, and I don't want you on the road. We can't test for that. We don't even try. On the other hand, what is the problem when I smoke some cannabis over the weekend and cannabis stays in your system for about 4 hours max and it has no lingering effects? None. There's no hangover. There's no impairment. But I can't ever smoke marijuana and go drive a truck. At some point, cannabis will stay in your system for up to 30 days.
Right. Yeah,
And
that's
if they
true.
detect it, I lose my CDL. This is ignorant. There is no way we should have rules around driving like this for alcohol and then a whole different set of rules for cannabis. But we still treat cannabis like it's some evil, in my mind, just treat it like alcohol. Just treat them the same.
Right. There was and here's the thing, when you try you say you want to be fair, and I think most people agree with you. Everybody wants things to be fair, but all people are different. Humans are all, some people, their system
Yeah,
filters things better.
right,
Some people are taller, shorter, squatter, fatter, different metabolisms. Different things affect different people differently. A guy I worked with one year on the ice, whose name shall remain anonymous. He would be a good boy, pass the drug screen prior to winter road starting in mid to late January, and then once the season got going, he was on that reefer all the time, all season. He was blazing for all 2 months of ice road, and he kept going. He kept up. He would work 18, 20 hours a day, no problem. Never got in an
yeah,
accident. Just kept going, kept going, kept going, kept going. Because like that job is very monotonous. Like
yeah,
people
no doubt.
people saw the TV show and they think it's all exotic, and it
Yeah,
is in many ways. It's a unique experience, but the biggest challenge on the ice as a driver is boredom and
yeah,
keeping your, because they get exemptions from HOS, from the Northwest Territories government, so you can work 7 days
right.
a week, no reset, and you just go hard until the season is over.
Yeah.
That's difficult for some people.
Oh,
Not
no
every,
doubt.
not everybody can do that. Not everybody can put in those kinds of hours continuously. And this
Right.
gentleman had figured out that if he was smoking when he was on the lakes, I think he stopped when he was on pavement because, like, didn't want to get caught. But when he
Right.
when he when he was up on the ice, he was enjoying himself, and that's what kept him going.
You know, the libertarian in me wishes we could manage things like that. The libertarian in me wishes we could leave things to people's own personal responsibility. And when you screw up, there should be heavy penalties to pay. But that's not how our world works. We treat everybody, we cater to the lowest common denominator in almost everything we do when it comes to regulations.
Right. We're sort of forced into that.
Yeah. Yeah, and I just I would like to see a world where you're allowed to use a lot more of your own judgment, and if you screw up, you should pay for it. That's kind of how I feel. I don't like to be told what to do. I think I have better judgment than anybody making the rules. They're not out there with me. You know, hours of service are no different. When I travel in my coach now, I still last year I think I was on the road 3 months. When I met you in at F3 last year in Chattanooga, I'd already been on the road about a month and a half, and I was gone another month and a half before I got home. When I'm in the coach and I have to do my show every day, so I have that time. I got to stop and get set up. I still have a lot of work to do. Plus, I have all this driving I'm doing. So I get in a mode because it works for me. And I used to do this when I drove truck. I grew up seriously thinking that you only had to do your logbook once a week because that's how my dad did it the whole time I was growing up. Every Sunday morning, I would see my dad at the kitchen table doing his logbook for the week. I thought that was how you did it. So when I started driving, that's just how now I figured out pretty quick that isn't how you were supposed to do it, but that's how I did it too. I just ran my week however it made sense to run my week. If I was tired, I slept. If I was alert and awake, I drove. That was my only criteria. And then at the end of the week, I would fill out the logbook and make it work. And when I travel in my coach now, that's how I do it. And what I end up usually on is a 4 on, 4 off schedule. I drive 4 hours, I sleep for 2 or 3. I drive for 4 hours. I can get a lot of miles in 24 hours like that. And I'm safe,
Are
but
you
you're not allowed to use that kind of judgment.
are you ever in that much of a hurry in your RV in the new life you're leading?
Sometimes I am. Sometimes I am. There was one trip where I was gone about 3 months and I constantly had deadlines. Like I was in Texas for this event up until this day, and then I had to get to Minnesota the next day for another event. And
Oof.
then I went from Minnesota to Louisville for an event. And when I left Louisville, I had to get out to California for an event, and I only had 3 days.
Yeah, burning
Plus, I'm
your
doing my show, plus I'm working.
yeah, burning yourself
Yeah.
out from events and conferences. Imagine that. Oh, jeez, tough life.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah,
so you're still doing your
exactly.
show. So I want to talk about a little bit more of your entertainment history or education history, as it were, and something which
Yeah.
puts you in much higher esteem to me that I did not know before you told me this story. You were a host for Sirius XM for a number of years,
I was their number one show.
right? So that's pretty impressive. And then
Number
you,
one show on the trucking channel. Let me be clear about that.
yeah,
On
yeah.
the trucking channel, not
So
on Sirius XM's whole platform.
Sirius XM Road Dog Trucking, which I'm sure many of my listeners will be familiar with, and then you were not. Um, so
Correct.
can you tell me for like how long you worked for Sirius XM, what you spoke about on your show, and then what it was that pushed you out of it?
Yeah, so the first time I would have been on XM would have probably been 2000, right around there, 2000, 2001. I did my first radio interview in 99, but that was on AM on Midnight Trucking. Um, I did Dave Nemo's show. I want to say the first year was like 2000, somewhere in that area. I did Dave's show for a couple of years. Back then, Sirius and XM were two different companies. So I was doing a weekly guest spot on Dave Nemo's show on XM. Then Mark Willis, who was on Sirius on their trucking channel, invited me to do a weekly spot with them, and I was doing a weekly spot on AM. I was doing 3 spots every week. And once a month, I would go to Nashville and I would do Dave's 5 hour show from his studio. And once a month, I would fly out to Fort Worth and I would do midnight trucking, all 5 hours overnight. And actually, I would leave midnight trucking at 5 o'clock in the morning after being there since midnight. It would take me an hour to drive across town to Mark Willis's Sirius studio, and I would do 4 more hours with him after being up all night. So when I was doing all that, this is back in the early 2000s, I went to in 2007. So I did all those guest spots for about 7 years. That's a lot of time on the air just as a guest.
Yeah.
So in 2007, when it was still XM, I went to XM and I said, look, I'm doing an awful lot of time. Why don't you just give me my own show? And they said, well, you don't have any experience. And I said, well, I have a lot of experience being a guest. And I don't think being a host can be all that hard. And finally they said, look, we can't pay you. We don't have any money. We don't have a budget for equipment. We can't give you a call screener or a producer, but we'll give you 3 hours on Saturday and Sunday if you can figure out how to produce a show and get it to us. And I said, all right, I'll figure it out. So I did. We did everything ourselves. We had our own call screeners, the producer, we did all of our own shows. Within a couple months, they liked my weekend show so much, they gave me the midnight slot 7 nights a week. So I actually had 9 slots back then on Sirius XM. I had midnight 7 nights a week, and I had 3 hours on Saturday and Sunday to do whatever I wanted with it. It was my show. Then they merged the two, and half the trucking channels got canceled because we took 2 channels down to 1. We lost people like Bill Mack. Bill Mack was actually a host back then on Sirius. So I made the cut. I was actually pretty surprised because I was the newest host back then. So I made the cut. I had been with the new company, Sirius XM, for 10 years with my own show when they offered me the prime time show, the #1 slot. And I did that for 5 before I got canceled. So 15 years with my own show on Sirius XM when I was canceled.
Damn, that's an awful lot of time to be spending on the radio yapping.
Yeah, 10,000 plus hours. I mean, it's a lot of time on the air. You know, I had 3 hour shows, which I still do today. I do 3 hours every day. But I got canceled over the Freedom Convoy, which I know is a big topic for you.
Right, yeah, well, as most people know, I'm from Canada originally. How I sort of got catapulted into writing professionally was because I was asked to write about the Freedom Convoy and what I saw there when I went to Ottawa. You guys all know that story. I still write about people being politically persecuted back home.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, you said there was some comment you made downstream of an interview you did with someone who was in Ottawa, and that comment got you in trouble.
Yeah, so there was a lot going on. You know what it was like in Ottawa. One of my regular listeners had been down there from day one, and he would call me and give me updates, and we would do it right on the air. And he called me one day on the air, and he said, hey, look, he said, they finally did it. And I said, what? And he said, my truck's gone. They towed it out of here, and I have no idea where it is. They won't tell me. I can't get it back. They shut down his bank accounts. And then he said, my wife runs her own business somewhere out west in Canada. I forget exactly where it was, but they shut down her bank accounts and her business had nothing to do with his.
Right.
I'm furious over this. I mean, I am just losing my mind about this on the air. And while he's telling me this story, I'm reading about one of our senators here, Congress, not senator. He's a senator now, unfortunately. He was a congressman then. And the American drivers were queuing up in California to drive to DC in support of the Canadian Freedom Convoy.
Yeah, they called it the People's Convoy. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. It was the People's Convoy. So I'm talking about that. I'm talking about the Freedom Convoy. And I see this comment from Ruben Gallego, congressman, ex-Marine, who says, let those truckers come to DC. We'll confiscate their truck and give it to somebody who wants to work.
Oof. Wrong thing to say to a guy like Kevin.
I lost my mind. That is, to me, that is a treasonous statement. You are not taking my business property because I exercise my freedom of speech. That is not happening. And for you to even say that is outrageous. And I responded with, he should be shot for treason.
Ooh, spicy.
It was a little over the top, but carry the logic. I think it's a treasonous statement. I
Some,
think he should have been.
especially for someone who, so this gentleman, this congressman at the time, was also a Marine. So
Well, he's
twice,
an ex-Marine.
yeah.
Right.
So I'm saying at one time he was a Marine. So twice in
Correct.
his life, he swore an oath to uphold the Constitution. Once when he
That's my
signed up to
point.
become a Marine. Once when he became a Congress critter.
That's my point. And when you've made that oath, you can't make statements like that. The statement was actually worse. This is how dumb he is, how ignorant he was of the industry. His real statement was, we'll confiscate their truck and give it to a smaller company that wants to work.
Yeah, but if most of the trucks going were sole independent owner operators, how much smaller can you get?
That's my point. He didn't even understand who he was talking about. There were no Swift drivers down there. Come on.
No.
There were no medium-sized companies with employee drivers down. That was all owner operators and small carriers. So to make it was just an ignorant statement, but then to me, it was a treasonous statement. But here's the thing. I said for a long time, I actually defended Sirius. I said, look, Sirius is a private company. This isn't a free speech issue. Sirius is a private company. If they don't like what I say, they have every right to cancel my contract. My contract says that. I signed it. So I wasn't really upset with Sirius. But the more I thought about it, the more I thought, no, this is a free speech issue, because here's how it happened. I had a hate group that had been following me around for a year by then, recording every one of my shows. They would edit things to make it look like I was racist, and they would send it out to, my sponsors or whoever. And this had been going on for over a year. So when they heard me make that statement, they immediately sent the recording to the congressman's office.
Oh.
Otherwise, this would have never happened. I've made more outrageous statements than that on the air, and nobody ever said a word about it. But because he was contacted directly, they played the quote for him. And when you're a congressman, you can pick up the phone and actually request the CEO at Sirius, and that's who he got.
Right.
He got to the CEO. Now I got thinking about it. That is a freedom of speech issue. That was an elected representative of our government putting pressure on a private company to cancel me. That should have never happened.
Right. And we see an analog from what happened to you here in a much larger incident where we had the Twitter files, where we find out that
Exactly.
people working for Biden were trying to tell Zuckerberg what to say and not to say on Facebook. They were telling Twitter to cancel certain people. There's ongoing lawsuits with this.
I've been deleted by YouTube so many times, we don't even try to put our stuff on YouTube anymore.
Oh, wow. Yeah, many such cases. You're not the only one.
Yeah.
But yeah, the problem here is that, like, we have the First Amendment, and that First Amendment says the government is not allowed to infringe on your freedom of speech. And
Correct.
what they're trying to do is they're trying to do an end run around that by having third parties do it for them, which is also a no-no. And
And that could happen in this case. I was canceled at the request of a sitting congressman.
Right, yeah, and they just happened to do it through an intermediary who was the CEO of Sirius. And like I said, when I first heard that story, Kev, like, that's a personal sacrifice on your part. Like, you lost your job, you lost your Sirius career, and
to this day, so we're 3 or 4 years into this now, we also lost $250,000 in revenue a year. I haven't made that back up yet. Sirius was a big platform. I had a big reach. Trying to recreate that on a podcast, pretty difficult. So yeah, I lost about $250,000 a year.
And 4 years, so now, 2 years, so now we're talking $500,000.
Yeah, easily.
Right. So yeah, your right to freedom of speech was lost, or was interrupted, and you lost $500,000 in revenue at the behest of a state official, which is wrong. And the real insult here
is that happened to you because you objected to this very same thing happening to my friends back home in Canada. So,
Exactly.
yeah, when I first heard this story, I'm like, you know what, man? Kevin takes a lot of crap online. There's people that disagree with him. I'm sure we'll disagree about things sooner or later. It happens. That's fine.
Yeah.
But
That's how we
on
learn.
that's how we learn. But on something that's extremely important, your right to freedom of speech. Without that, you're not allowed to think because you can't, because you don't know what's going on, because no one's allowed to talk. That's
Right.
our most. That's why it's the First Amendment, not the
That's
second,
exactly
not
right.
the third. And you're on the right side of that, sir. And for that, I say thank you very much, and for standing up for my friends in the Freedom Convoy. Good for you.
Well, thank you. It was the right thing to do. And you know what? Um, when you do the right things for the right reasons, you're rewarded. It may not be in the way, like I still have not made back that revenue. We're still working on it. I'll figure it out. But I'm down on revenue. I'm much, much happier doing what I do now. I'll figure out the revenue thing, but I love doing my show on my own. I love being completely independent. And now, even though I do 3 hours in the exact same time slot I used to do at Sirius, I have zero commercials. We don't take a break. When I do a 3 hour show, or some days today was like 3 hours or yesterday was like 3 hours and 20 minutes. That's no breaks. I love being able to do this because it's more like you and I right now. If we would have to break every 12 minutes, which is what Sirius was, it's so disruptive to the flow of the conversation. I don't like talking about things on the surface. I like to get deep down into things and follow themes and when you try doing that with an interruption every 12 minutes, it just doesn't work well.
No, it doesn't. And this
You
is
and
why
I can sit here.
yeah, and
Yeah,
this is why the format is so popular. Like Joe Rogan, considered like sort of the king of podcasting.
yeah,
Maybe not the first, but certainly the biggest.
yeah,
He's popular for a reason because it's unfiltered, 2, 3, 4 hour long
yeah.
conversations. Maybe if it's Alex Jones, it's 10.
Yeah, exactly.
But no, this is a good format, and I see clearly it's working well for you. I have to go. Speaking of time, I'd love to go 3 hours. Unfortunately, I've got kids upstairs that need to get put to bed.
There you go.
So just before we go, tell everybody where they can find you, when they can listen to Let's Truck with Kevin Rutherford, and everything you do, and I'll point people towards you.
Yeah, so the easiest place to go to the website, letstruck.com. Yeah, and just click on everything. We do so much stuff. It'd take me an hour to try to outline it all, but you'll be able to. So our show, I will tell you how we do our show. I so when I got canceled on a Thursday, and it happened at the end of the show. I had made the comment with only about a half hour left, and I got a text with about 15 minutes left in my show, and it was from the VP of Talk Programming, and all it said was "call me." And I thought, yeah, well, okay, he's going to mention this comment. And they had given me a week off about 6 months before that for some other comment I made. So I kind of knew my time was probably short, but I was not expecting to get canceled on that call. I just thought they were going to give me another week off or whatever, or make me apologize or something. So I called him and they have caller ID. Here's how the call went. He picked up the phone and said, "You're done." Not hello, not why did you do it, not he just said, "You're done." But then he started explaining how they were going to cover Friday's show because this was Thursday and Monday. And he's talking and I'm like, "Why are you still talking?" And he said, "What do you mean?" And I said, "You told me we're done." And I hung up. There's nothing left to talk about at that point. Why are you telling me how you're going to cover my show the next day? I don't care. It's not going to be me. So I took that Friday off just to think about things. And I spent about 8 hours the next morning, early Saturday morning, hacking together some software so I could go back on the air again. And I went on the air all weekend. I broadcast on Saturday and Sunday just to tell everybody I'm not going anywhere. I'm here. We're going to come back in our same time slot. And I told my programming team, I need you to build me a platform so that if they want to shut me up next time, they're going to have to turn off the internet. We're not going to use anybody else's platform that can cancel me because I said something they don't like. So we got busy and we built our own platform and we have our own app. So the best way to listen to our show is on our app. So if you go to your app store, look up Let's Truck and then look up Audio Road, you'll see our app. Every show's on there. There's like 3,600 hours worth of past shows. Everything's there. You can listen like that. We also live stream the video out everywhere. It goes to X, Facebook. We used to go to YouTube, but we got our account deleted so many times we gave up. It's on LinkedIn. I think it's on Instagram, might be on Rumble. But the best way is just to go find our app.
Right. And over and above all of this content creation, you also have a coaching course where you help people start their own businesses and make them better.
My coaching program is my favorite thing that I do. This is something I just started less than a year ago, and I can't believe I didn't do this sooner. So on the radio show, it's kind of surface. I can't get too deep into things. It's still a radio show, and I don't have a lot of background. And I realized there were people that needed my help, and I wasn't giving them any way of getting that help. So I created this group coaching. So I might have 100 people on the call itself, but I may only be working with 1 or 2 people that week. But everybody gets to listen. The interesting thing was, my fear was, if I start this, if there's too many people and I don't have time to spend with everybody, this won't work. And I got this huge sign up in the beginning and I panicked. I'm like, oh man, I blew it. There is no way I can handle this many people when we're going to go in depth. Well, it turns out 80% of the people joined the program and they don't want to ask any questions. They just want to listen. So it's working out really good. I have this big group, but I've got a small group, but I go really, really deep. I have somebody who's been in the program over a year now. I've been in it since the first month I started it. And it's a monthly thing. You pay a fee and you have a month worth of coaching, and I do a call every week. So you get 4 calls a month, and you can start and stop anytime. You're not committed to 12 months, or you start whenever you want. I have somebody I'm working with, a small family fleet that at one point had 30 trucks, very successful for decades. And now they're down to less than 10 trucks and they're almost out of business. And I've been working with them for a year and we've saved the company. We're having some struggles now because now there's family fighting going on. But that's how in depth I've gotten. I mean, I helped a small fleet find and buy a shop to run their trucks out of. So in the coaching program, I feel like I really get to use 40 years worth of business experience and go really deep and help people with some pretty big stuff. Plus I do, I was a certified financial planner for years. I don't keep that designation up, but I still know it all. I just don't give them their $1,000 a year to say I'm a CFP anymore. I do have the health designations. So in my coaching program, I help people with anything they want help with. Could be their health, it might be their money, their retirement accounts, their truck, their business, whatever. And I just love doing that.
Right. I might have to hit you up at some point for that. Hopefully, if I ever
There you go.
get back out and get back up on the road. So anyway, Mr. Kevin Rutherford, thank you so much for your very valuable time, sir. I've really been looking forward to this. Maybe we should do it again sometime, maybe in the new year.
Put me on the schedule. I'd love to do it again. I think you and I could talk about many things.
Yeah, no. This was good flow, and I hope my listeners enjoy it. Go follow Kevin, check out his show, and yeah, learn. You're a wealth of information, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. I enjoyed it. Thanks for having me.
All right, no, thanks again, sir, and everybody else. Way of the road.